I do the writing group. I'm a substitute teacher. I am on the library board, and I'm part of the Methodist Church. So I have a lot of overlaps.
Lots of hats.
You substitute K through 12 or?
I always make babies and small children cry, so I only do middle school up to high school. But sometimes I make them cry too.
Right.
So,
All subjects.
like today, I was in the shop. I was there for 3 days.
Wow.
This morning, I was in the social studies class for 2 hours. And then I was Mrs. Wages, the English teacher, on Monday. I signed up to do Mrs. Houseman's science class in April.
Oh.
So I've got, there are some teachers I do not sub for.
Oh.
Because if I don't know the subject, I told the music teacher, I said, I have no rhythm. So I don't do music because I have no rhythm.
Right.
Are we gonna have that?
We are having that.
Gotta tell my husband.
Yeah, me too. Tell mine at the same time.
Okay.
I didn't know if you would or not. So
Yeah, we're on board. We're a little bit late because of all of the chaos, but that's all right. I will leave this out where people can. No, I've been doing the writing group for 9 years.
Went the other way.
But then.
I thought you went the other way.
I was gonna get some.
Oops,
Sorry.
I helped edit
Extra paper?
started all of this.
No. We got nothing together yet.
Yeah.
I really did a copy of that after we
Yes.
did it filled out though, so I can keep
Yes.
stuff for our grant.
Yeah, and I'm just, like I said, I'm
You have a
having them write
second
the
pen, you
numbers
said?
and phone numbers down, but.
Yeah.
So, how are you?
Doing pretty well.
I'm glad to see you. We're gonna do this twice, but I'm gonna have you on my notebook. I'm gonna have you, put your names and the phone number down so that I can communicate with you. And, yeah, Lois is on the Friends at the library, but she's also, I don't know, we've known each other. Oh, yeah. He was actually back, something about the reading thing. Frank, did you come? One of the writing things that they did early on, seems like you did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so I got acquainted with him years ago through another writing event, and then Lois and he together, and then they walk on Bird all the time. So
Joe Harlan, because you used to come up to Joe. Joe Harlan would come in for lunches and with Mavis, and
yeah,
he started joining us for that too.
so we had, kind of a lot of that.
Oh,
She was an amazing lady. There are a lot of amazing people in this.
Still some paper from you.
Actually, we'll see whether you need to take it out of there or.
Oh, you're already set? You just got her name on here.
Yeah, and I don't know. We'll just let them know, we don't need to have the chairs in there until we.
So far, these people are all signed in, so I can get back to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Dan.
You fell asleep and had to get late for lunch and didn't have a paper. And I'm like, ah! So, nap time. You're right.
I didn't look at it.
Okay.
I'm gonna let you sit wherever you want to sit, but I'm gonna move on. Okay, I'm gonna move all this stuff off of here so we make people think that there are not more seats taken than there are.
Oh, I'll take that, Margaret. Don't you go or stay or?
Well, you can
I was
stay.
thinking I was gonna stay, that's all mine.
Oh,
You can't leave.
I'm sorry.
Denise, you're here.
I'm trying.
No, you can't leave.
It's been a week, guys.
It has been a week. It has been a month. Nope. February technically is considered the shortest month of the year, but it is always my longest.
We were the same way. She's supplying us all. She's the paper that we
Sorry.
Well, you're almost out here.
Well, I'm gonna do it this way. I meant to try and run to Family Dollar and buy you all journals, but I didn't get that.
Oh, we should have been able to take responsibility for
No,
our
I'm
paper.
fine. I'm a little bit behind the scenes here. So, and I'm gonna have you, if you wouldn't mind, put in your name and your phone number information down there, so that I've got a contact And when everybody gets in here, let's see. Monica, do you have that list of people who are signed up to do this so I can take a look at it?
Well, it wasn't up here.
I probably smooshed it all.
So this is my copy. I can do
No,
another
I
copy,
just need
but-
to see. All right,
TL.
Amy's here. Gladys said she had a doctor's appointment, so I knew she was not coming. Clarence Bishop, Sam Humphrey, and Eve, and Dave Reeves, I'm not sure. Maybe he forgot. Meredith Sears, Warren Thomas, Jim Shell, Frank Pratt, and Lois Peterson. Well, I know a couple of them.
Meredith is on YouTube here, and she'll probably
so.
come if she can.
Yeah, I think so. We're assuming, and like I said, some of them might not be able to make it today because of the weather.
Yeah, Margaret's boss kind of wanted to go, but she said she couldn't do it for me.
Yeah, and if she wants to join us, I think we've still got some space, right?
Possibly a couple.
Depending on who does it. I know, for example, like I said, Gladys told me ahead of time she could not make it, so we'll see how this goes.
I bet we're pretty full because we have at least 4 people, maybe 5 now on the YouTube streaming right now.
Okay.
So there should be 2 people in Story and 2 people in KC. And 1 gal who got snowed in who will come here if she's able to.
So I wonder if Dave's on the drive. I don't see him
He's
out
sitting
there.
out there.
Is he out there?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't see it.
That's the way I like it.
Is your husband joining us, or are you?
No, just me. Do you want me to go with Dave?
No, when he's ready. I mean, he might be wanting to talk to the musicians, so I just. So this is a little different than when I started this, years ago. I literally had 3 people who were my constants, and they came week after week for quite a while. And it was 3 people for almost a year. So there were hardly, then we began to find, somebody said, oh, it's kind of fun, you ought to come. Nancy Lee brought her daughter, then there was somebody else, and then, so it kind of evolved, and so now we have a group of people that have been coming for quite a while. But every last one of them said to me, oh, I can't write. Oh, I can't do this. I haven't. And then I found out that they had been writing secretly. They just didn't want anyone to know that they had actually been putting anything to paper. And when I advertised this at the senior center lunch, I said, if you can do a grocery list, if you can write an email, if you can do a text, we're going to start there. Because I think the key is not being too intimidating. But what I would like to do before we even get started is to get a bit of a feel for who you are, a little bit of background about where you came from, what your particular backgrounds might be, just, a minute or two, a little bit of background. So we have Sam, who's kind of new to this group, I think, and so he might not be known. We've got people who know each other in one context, but not in another. So I'm going to start, and before I go any further, we need to thank Danica. It's all because of Danica that we are meeting. All right? She wrote the grant last summer, got the grants, so we're getting this thing rolling because she put a lot of work into getting it done for a bunch of different things. This is not the only one that the grant came through for. But this group is coming together because she got the money to make it happen. And we're going to talk about a little bit of those things that are involved, but not maybe right here at the beginning, because I think the main thing is that, and by the way, I will probably sit down in a minute because I'm not technically trying to make this a teaching moment as much as a sharing kind of experience. But a lot of it is, I tend to stand solely so people can hear me, because sometimes my voice gets lost. It's not very resonant. So I lose, I either speak in a microphone or I speak in a group. And here comes Dave. So, and then I will just ask this, do we have anybody online down in KC or in Story already?
I think we have 5 people.
Well, are they so that we can see them?
No, this isn't Zoom. Normally with Zoom, you can see.
Right, but
Yeah.
I meant there won't be any way for us to see who's talking.
Right. I
Okay.
gave them a number, so they should be able to text and ask questions.
Yeah, but I'd like a name. Hey, Dave, come on and
Hi.
join us.
This
Hi, Dave.
sobriety class?
This is the writing.
Okay.
I thought you said the sobriety class. I went, well, maybe a little bit of that too.
Well, yeah.
That too. So, no, this is the writing group. But I think the thing I want to make sure is that, because we can't see the people in the other communities, to just know that they are there and to get familiar with who they are, their names. And Dave, do you want the chair with the handles on it? There's one right here.
Oh, okay.
That would maybe be easier than to hang on to try to, the air.
There you go.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. There you
Now,
go.
grabbing in the back when there's nothing there is a little unstabilizing. Okay, so Dave, I'm just saying that we're starting with this, with the understanding that this is a kind of an experiment, but I've been doing the writing group with the other seniors for 9 years, so it's not entirely new to me. But a lot of it is just feeling comfortable with each other, sharing with each other, finding out what you want to write. That's the other question I would ask, is what would you kind of like to have as an experience out of this group? We will have 8 sessions, and I've kind of got some outline of what we're going to focus on. But I think that I want to be flexible enough to adjust my lesson plans based on what it is that you kind of want to accomplish. If you don't have anything in particular, but you just joined, that's great. But I know Edie told me she was already in the process of doing some writing. Some of you may have already done so. So I just would like to have a start. And Jane, why don't we start with you? We'll deal the deck of cards this direction. Tell us a little bit of who you are, have you done any writing, what kind of background do you have? And it doesn't have to be about writing, it could be just generally, where are you from and all that kind of stuff.
Okay, I was born in California, migrated to Wyoming in '74, lived in Douglas for 37 years, and then moved here where our son was. After we retired, I've been here 11 years. I worked pretty much most of my adult life. I retired in 2006. And I have 2 children, married. Pretty much clerical type stuff. I worked for the state of California 13 years and for the state of Wyoming 22 years, something like that. Worked for the Commerce County Attorney's Office, different other places, mostly clerical type stuff, secretarial, clerical, light supervision. So I'm used to paper stuff, but I have not written like stories or anything of that nature.
Do you have anything in particular you want to try, or that you came with the idea that maybe you might want to do?
Not like a family historical
Okay.
story in a story form.
Okay, all right,
And I've made many notes and many
okay, good,
whatever, but I've not written this type of work.
okay. So a little bit of family history,
It's more of a story
but in a story form.
type of form.
Okay. Let me, I'll come back to that in a bit, but it gives me some ideas. Okay, so Edie, what about you? Those of us that know you a little bit know you have a really wide variety of things you've done. Give the group a little bit of a synopsis of who you are and how you ended up in this group.
Okay, well, I'm writing my memoirs. I've got a good start already.
Okay?
But I'm Edie Chapter, and I was born and raised in Wyoming, except for 2 years of my life that I lived in Montana. So I'm a really Wyoming native, and I was raised out in the boonies. And I had one sister and 2 baby brothers that didn't come along until I was already 13. And so I used to, I got to be really good friends with a gal that was married to my cousin till she was widowed. She came back to Buffalo, and I was telling her about some of my things that happened in my life, and she said, "You gotta write that down. You gotta write that down." And I thought, well, maybe that's a good idea. So I decided I'd kind of write up my life, and I was telling Margaret, I said, I'm stuck. I've gotten part way, and now I can't remember. I can't remember the dates, and I don't know whether that's important or whether it isn't. But anyway, I kind of got started again. I'm getting kind of old and forgetting things. I'm going to turn 92 this month, so I'm forgetting a few things, and especially dates. I've been calling up my daughter saying, "Well, what do you think about this? And do you remember his name?" So, and they're all wanting to read it, and I said, "I'm not sure I'm going to let anybody read it because you're going to say that isn't what happened."
It's your story, you stick to it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, I finally started. I was realizing that I was, I couldn't remember. I'm not very good at remember dates. Well, I have 4 children. Somebody will say, "Well, what year was Bill born?" I said, "Don't ask me. I was there, but I don't remember what year." So I finally decided I wrote down that, and then I figured out when they graduated, and I wrote when I was married and a few things. I wrote down on a piece of paper because I realized I was forgetting things. So now I kind of got this date line, and I'm doing better. So if anybody's got any ideas, and I don't know that I'm a good writer, and I guess I don't really care if it's done in proper form. I just kind of wanted to make a story of my life so that my kids and my grandkids know something about me after I'm gone.
Well, this might almost be like, rehashing it, but the one thing I would ask, Edie, if when we get ready to do these assignments, would you share, like, as we go through these, if you find there's something you've already kind of done, would you be willing to share that in the group as we read it?
Sure.
So that people can hear what you, and then hopefully our point is to be able to respond to what people are sharing and saying, this is confusing to me, or this is what I really like, or whatever. There is an aspect of not criticism, because that is one of my big pet peeves. That I don't like. Well, I didn't write it for you. That's my first response.
Yeah.
Somebody say I don't like. It's like, well, I don't care. I didn't write it for you. What I want to have people do is to say, this is what I found confusing, or what if you could make it say, what I've been working on a memoir myself, and I've been working on it for a really long time, and I've had a lot of people read it and go, well, you need to really tell about blah blah blah. Well, I didn't want to write about that. Well, finally, I had so many people say, you really need to tell us this because we don't understand that. I found like, okay. I had to go back and write stuff I did not want to tell. It wasn't there was anything big secret, it's just I didn't want to focus on all that. I wanted to focus on the story I had, but it didn't make sense without the backstory. So it may be when you share something, we can either ask if we say, yes, I want to, this is what I wrote, or, oh, well, that would be something I could add. So that I think of where you are, and you may be very much farther ahead than anyone else in this table, and then again, maybe we've got people who've done the same thing.
Well, and I already have one question because I went through, and I just talked about myself mostly, and then I stopped in the middle and I said I realized that I haven't said too much about the children as they grew up. So I stopped and wrote a synopsis of each one of their lives.
Okay.
So
Well,
I don't know whether that's appropriate or whether it is.
Yeah, look, we're going to actually talk about that. But I want to just make sure everybody has had a chance to kind of introduce themselves and then give us a little bit of background of background and a little bit of what you want to do. So Frank, what about you?
Born in Missouri on a dairy farm. got drafted, went overseas, came back, lived in Colorado, went to school in Colorado, taught for a while in Colorado, too young to have a career. I ended up in Alaska, met somebody up there that grew fond of, and so we ended up there, retired out of Alaska, came down here in 2006, started a euchre club so I could be eating euchre.
And you've been doing it ever
Ever
since.
since.
Well, I want to put a little bit of plug in this that I know about Frank. One of the things that I really admired and found out about him is he started a book reading program in Alaska that proved to be a really important part of their education. So do you want to tell just a tiny bit about that?
I didn't start that. Lois, my wife, got me involved in it, and a friend of ours brought it to Alaska, but it was called Battle of the Books. And it was a bigger program than basketball, football, any sport in Alaska. There were more kids involved in that than any other extracurricular activity. And the Librarians Association in Alaska would get together and select really, really fine books. And this was all the way from, was it kindergarten? Yeah, kindergarten to 12th grade. And I found it, and I was a teacher and a school administrator in Alaska, and many of the students that weren't involved in the sports part of it gravitated to battling books, and it became so big in the state that they had battles between schools. And when I came down here, I started it here, and we ended up using Skype, I guess it was, that Skype and Zoom or whatever, and we battled at a school in Alaska, and for a variety of reasons, it's kind of died out here. But there is one thing story that I'd like to tell. And I will someday.
Okay, yeah, and that, therein lies part of what I have a vision for this group, is that you all have remarkable stories. There isn't a person that comes to this place that I am not going, oh my gosh, what a story. No matter who it is or what they've done. And sometimes it seems really small, but the profound impact. How many of you remember Nancy Lee Beatty?
Yes.
Nancy Lee Beatty was 92 when she died. She had been a nurse, and she had been a 4-H leader, and that was more frightening than being a nurse. And she had had multiple children. She traveled, and she came and she continued to write and participate in this group until she died. Like within weeks of her, she passed away. And she was small, she was quiet. She had, I think, some kind of a stroke that affected her throat, so she couldn't speak loudly. But what a wit. Every time she'd write something, it just made me laugh.
Yeah.
Because she was,
Nancy and I were twins. We were born on the very same day.
she was a delight. And so I think about her because she was so small and she was so quiet.
Yeah.
And you didn't hardly know she was in the room until she said something, and she was so quiet you could almost not hear her, but she just threw me a curve every time. So the great stories and poems and the funny things that came out of her mouth were just, I took great delight. So that's one of my big things about this group. Okay, so Lois, tell us a little bit about you.
Big city, Detroit area, grew up there. Was an English teacher, went to Michigan State University, 40,000 other people. And decided with some friends that we thought Alaska would be fun, so I went up to Alaska.
I was alone. I had another friend that went at the same time. And I was an English teacher, a lot of teacher there because my first class was coming from Michigan State. And my first class or teaching situation was I was the teacher for 7th through 12th grade, 12 students, and I taught everything. There was no other teachers, except itinerant teachers. So big to small, English as a background, but I taught adult basic education in Michigan. Then I became the librarian in Bush, Alaska. So, and then we met there the third year I was there. And took some time off, got married, and we now write mostly Christmas letters. Christmas time letters to kind of let people know what we've been doing and that type of thing. And hopefully lure them up this way so that we can continue our friendships with people in Michigan, Missouri, and Alaska.
I'm going to talk about Christmas letters. I didn't put it on here as a topic. But what distinguishes your Christmas letters from one year to the next? Is it just routine? And my Susie dog died last Tuesday. I'm just what kind of Christmas letter do you write?
We try to make it humorous. We try to give the highlights of where we've traveled to, that type of thing, where we invite other people to join us on such and such a thing. But just mostly our adventures, I guess.
That, and also, we try to put in contacts that we've had with people that we knew in Alaska or someplace, and if we're writing to somebody else in Alaska, it's kind of a connection with, oh, they came through on such and such a time, and we had a great time reminiscing, all that. So it's still a lot of our Christmas letters has a portion of it about our past and the connections with other people that we're still in contact with.
What I'd like you to think about doing is, in the next few weeks, paw through your collection of Christmas letters and find a distinctive one that you could share with us as a group as you think about it. Because people write, I write Christmas letters that they get at Valentine's Day. Because most of the time I don't get around to doing it. I send them out and I figure they're more likely to read them than anyway because they don't throw them away. It's a new piece of real mail that they get. That's important. But I have always worked really hard at trying to write something that has an element of humor, no matter how dismal and horrible the year might have actually been. Because sometimes you have those years that are full of tragedy and full of angst. And so how do you not dwell on the bad and hear somebody go, oh, I'm really looking forward to reading this. But I had a Christmas letter from somebody who's a cousin. I didn't know who Carrie Barkley was. And the entire letter was a description of her pregnancy and her delivery of her baby. And not one of the cousins had any idea who it was. All of a sudden we were going, did you get a letter? It was almost 4 months before we all kind of decided who we got that from. It's like, I got the weirdest Christmas. So did I. It was weird because there was nothing. If she hadn't mentioned a grandmother dying and it wasn't ours, I would have gone, I have no idea. But she mentioned somebody in Columbus, Ohio, and I went, I think that's Kathy Boyles' sister. I was like, it was the weirdest Christmas letter I've ever read. So I don't think I kept it, but at any rate, I want you to think about one that distinctively kind of speaks to Lois and Frank's stories that you want to share. So we'll come to you, Sam. What about you, and kind of who are you, and what's your background?
Okay, I was born in Moscow, Idaho, and then my dad was teaching for the military then. So we spent 4 years in Germany, a year in Japan, and then moved back to the Spokane, Washington, Coeur d'Alene, Idaho area. Because my grandparents, one set was in Auburn, Idaho, and the other set in Moscow, Idaho. And he wanted just, to be in my sisters to grow up close to them. So I grew up mostly in the Pacific Northwest, Montana, Idaho, around a little bit, and Nevada. Got out of high school, went in the Navy for 4 years, wanted to be a commercial diver, that didn't work out. When I got out of the Navy, went to a community college and got a degree in commercial diving. Did that for 32 or 33 years. While I was doing that, I went back to college and got a degree in biology and my teaching certification, thinking I was going to dive in the summers and teach in the winters. And being a white male at that time, I couldn't get a job as a teacher. So, and I wasn't making anywhere near the money I made diving anyway. And diving, I traveled all around the world. Been riding motorcycles since I was 8. In 2018, I had a motorcycle accident, in a wheelchair and stopped my guy in Korea. Got really pissed off for about a year and a half, 2 years maybe. And I went to this little week-long camp put on by people that help people with spinal cord injuries. And kind of it turned my attitude around, I guess, and everything. And that was such a great experience that I had to write about it. So I wrote a book in about a month and a half about what happened and how I got in the wheelchair and then that experience at that camp, and published it on Amazon. And before that, when I was really pissed off, was like I was trying to think of good things and stuff. So I started writing about my diving career, but I stopped, I don't know, about a year and a half and didn't write anything that year. But then after I did my book about my accident, I just the writing bug got back into me. So I finished that diving book, wrote another one, and we were living in Montana at the time. I met Cindy in 2002. She grew up there. She was born in Wyoming. She grew up there. Her dad used to have Baldwin gun shop.
And what's Cindy's name?
Her maiden name's Baldwin.
Okay.
And then she married Turk, and then they got divorced. I met her in Wolf Creek, Montana, and that's what kind of dives out there.
Okay.
So we got married in 2004. 2 years ago, we moved here just because I needed, care and stuff, and we didn't have any family around there. And all of her family's here in Wolf Creek. So, in Buffalo. So we moved down here from there 2 years ago. And her sister Donna turned us on to the senior center, and it's been great.
So do you have any children?
I have a daughter and a son. My daughter is in Brazil right now. I married a Brazilian for 10 years. So my kids are half Brazilian, half American. But my daughter is basically based out of Spokane, Washington. She's a graphic designer, and my son lives in Vancouver, Washington.
Well, Sam, with this experience that you've already got writing, I guess, and I'm not, because we are going to be all over the levels of, what is the title of your book, first of all?
The first one I wrote about my accident is What the Hell Happened to Me. My first dive book's called Wet Pay, and the second dive book's Drying Out.
Let me ask you this, the drying out, is there a double entendre of it?
Yeah, there is, because wet pay, because as a diver, you get paid more when you're underwater than you do on the surface, and I don't know, it's kind of a thing. And then drying out is about the second half of my career. I was more into supervising and stuff, so I spent less time underwater than out of water. And, and also divers, most of us like to drink a lot, and so, there's a lot of that. I mean, there's no stories in there really, but it was a drier time in my life there.
Yeah.
The first time.
Now, what was your expectations of this group?
This one actually, I'd say I've taken creative writing when I was in, junior high and in high school, because I've always been interested in writing, and I took creative writing and technical writing when I was in college. And then, I just always messed around with writing. So and the books that I've written, I wrote more for kind of like necessity, stuff I had to get off my chest. But I also, right now, I'm working on a fiction novel. And so that's one thing that I kind of was hoping to get some kind of help and with it. It's like 90% done, but and you've worked with books before, so you know that the editing, I don't know how many times and all that kind of stuff. And I'm also working on a third diving book. And my diving books have my voice, and they're kind don't know, more like storytelling books. That's like friends of mine have described it as like if you're sitting in a ball of sand and telling your story. That's how the book reads. So that's fine. In my third diary book, I want to keep it in that same voice. The other book, my fiction book, not necessarily in that same voice.
Okay,
And
so.
I probably can help with that.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that that's, I mean, like I said, I want to make some adaptations to my plans based on what I'm hearing. I have a plan, but it's possible that we can incorporate what you want in my lesson plan as I make adjustments. Because we weren't sure, first of all, if the class was going to have enough people to make it. So I did the first couple of these lesson plans just as a really cold writing kind of experience, but I need to find out what people can do. And so that creative writing part of what you're doing, if there's a way that we can incorporate some of that into these assignments, you could bring some of that, and let's talk about the technical elements, the critique side of your creative writing that could fit into what we're doing. The reason I'm kind of having to follow this is because within the grant, there are certain parameters that she needs me to meet. But I also don't want to waste people's time. I want you to be able to do what you want to do and achieve, because I have the sense that yours sounds to me very potentially like a personal narrative, like a memoir material. And now it's maybe, and his is obviously already worked on towards creative writing. I'm not too sure that maybe we still don't want to incorporate poetry. Not everybody is a poet, but the experience of writing some poetry tightens what you say. If you've never written anything, then that's not, I don't want to scare anyone away. If you have, then what I can help do is say, okay, let's take this scene, for example, the most influential person. That might be your teacher back when you were 16. It might very well be your grandchild. Somebody that turned you around. Someone. Write a poem. Instead of writing the whole chapter, you turn it around. You do some tightening because then you think about the very bare bones of writing. I confess before all everybody here, I don't sub in music because I have no rhythm. I don't write poetry that involves clapping or tapping on the thing or anything that involves a standard rhythm because I'm terrible at it. I give people assignments and say, well, actually, I don't give them assignments, I give them prompts and say, try your hand at a villanelle or try your hand at a sonnet, and the best you can do, because I'm not going to be able to tell whether you're doing the meter correctly or not. I'm terrible at that. So, admission. So if we'll come on to Dave and see what you're thinking. Dave, what is your desire for this group? And who do we have here?
We just need chairs, sorry.
Okay. I thought maybe you were joining.
We can't use those chairs that are these arm chairs.
Oh, yeah, the armchairs are hard with the guitars.
If you can sing and play bass, we'll take you.
Okay. You just got through hearing me say I have no rhythm. So that's for sure. So, what do you, tell us a little bit about you and maybe what kinds of things you might like to do.
I'm the oldest of 6.
And I'm gonna wait, Dave, I'm not trying to shut you off, but I think in order to hear you, let's wait till we can shut it down. It's, the space gets difficult, and I'm not sure, we need to check and see if they
They
can.
said they could hear.
They can?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
I know, I was kind of surprised, but
Yeah, this technology is wonderful, but it's also intimidating. Okay. So, thanks, Lois. Does she need to come through here?
oh, yeah. Looks like she's coming. She's got a walker.
Yeah. Let her in, so now she's trying to get out.
We had a lot of shuffling today. This is a busy place. I've got taxes in the other room, this event, and then they normally do tech help on Fridays. So that's where she's coming because that went into the ceramics room.
Yeah, and pineapple or euchre or something in the other room.
Yeah.
There was something else. Okay, so now we've got the door closed. Tell us about you. You started to say you were the oldest of 6.
I'm the oldest of 6.
Wow.
the only one of my siblings that never been married, don't have kids.
You have been married?
No,
Okay.
never. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Wheaton, Illinois, which is known as the evangelical Mecca of the Midwest. There's over 300 Christian organizations that have their headquarters there. I'm sorry?
It's where Billy Graham's library is.
Yes, yes,
And also most of C.S. Lewis's work.
yes, yes, yes.
It's a great college.
Yes, I did. Yes. I went to school in North Dakota, got a BA degree in Christian education with a youth minor, and a BA degree in general Bible with a ministerial emphasis. I lived for about 5 years in the Indianapolis area, where I got 3 associate's degrees from Purdue University, Indiana University at Indianapolis. One in business management, one in accounting, one in computer science.
Dave, can you speak up a little bit? I'm right close
Oh,
to you, but
sorry.
I bet they can't hear because of this heat,
Yeah.
the air going. So if I can't hear you, they can't.
Okay. I've been an accountant for 30 years. I did everything from beginning bookkeeping to being a CFO of several organizations and also started some companies. I drove a school bus for 10.5 years in the Chicago area. And was able to start a special Olympics chapter in 2 of the counties that were not very next to where I live. I have had the opportunity of going down 32 different short-term mission trips in various parts of the world. I did a lot of work with horses, which resulted in riding in some rodeos in Nebraska. I learned that bull riding in Bronco Rusty, which I could never ever do now. But I love horses, and all my life I've wanted to be in the mountains, but never had the opportunity. I was always worked 3 or 4 jobs all at the same time. Actually, so busy with work that I missed some of the better things in life. But anyway, I moved out here from the Chicago area almost 12 years ago. And I 2 years prior to moving out here, I lost the sight in my right eye and only see about 3% out of the left eye. I came out here mostly because my brother was out here and he had made multiple patients, and finally when I was hospitalized with stage 4 renal failure, congestive diabetes, hypertension, and kidney failure. I came out here and the blindness was kind of the worst they were bringing me out to Wyoming Arts to get the medical help that I could not get in the Chicago area. It just, the Lord's brought me a long, long ways from when I moved out here. I could hardly walk. I had sores from need best examples.
I'm gonna interrupt just long enough to find out, is that what you want to write about? Is that
I-
the part that you kind of, as you're telling us this?
The Lord has done a lot of things in my life, a lot of miracles. And I want to put on paper some of what the Lord has done so that it's not lost behind that.
Okay, so your focus is kind of a spiritual and religious, I hesitate to use the word religion, but that you want the focus to be a more spiritual tone and content?
Yes, more retelling. I had the opportunity to be involved with a lot of different things during the course of life, and there's things that I'd rather not have lost. If someone else can benefit from it.
Okay.
And, so it's partly spiritual, partly just wanting to learn how to put things on paper.
So testimonial?
Yes. I in high school, I did end up writing. It's about 800 pages of local paper. A poorly written story, but a
But it's a creative story.
story nonetheless, and which it's been lost over the years and never.
So let me just ask this question, Danica, is there a way for the people who are in your story or KC to speak to us, to tell us?
Yeah.
Are they able to speak into the phone?
Meredith sent a message. I think the people in KC left, but if the people in story want to send a message or call in, my number is 307-752-4812. But Meredith lives out by, is that Lynn?
Lynch?
Lynch?
What's her last name?
Sears. And she was in the leather group this fall with this program. So she's half on the other side of Casey, 30 or so miles. So she might come up here when she's able, but I'm glad we had this set up for her because she's really into her own.
Is she out in Lynch right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
She's coming from home.
Well,
all the way from home.
Well, I live north of her,
Oh,
about probably 18 miles.
okay.
Lynch, well, maybe farther. I'm up on Crazy Woman, that's straight north out of Lynch. Like if you go up that county road, you'll end up at our place, one way or the other, you end up there. So, yeah, I live out in the country.
I know she's doing a lot of her family history and genealogy, but her texted intro here says, Meredith Sears, I live in the southeast corner of Johnson County on a small acreage. I worked as an administrator, office assistant, book manager. It looks like Patty's calling. I'll call you right back. And let's see, now she's retired. Meredith does some work, I think, still with accounting and such too. She has a hobby. She wrote comedic cattle and ag stories for history for several farm and ranch magazines.
Good.
And Morgan Horse Story for the Breed publication. And she's excited about this class.
Okay. Meredith, can you send this back to her and just tell her that if she has an email, I will email these prompts to her, so
Okay.
she has that. I was gonna ask.
Oh, actually, I sent that up. I can't remember if I sent her that one. Casey and Story both ended up with that, though.
Okay. Just as a question, do you email?
Yes.
Do you, Dave?
I am not able to retrieve email.
Okay, well,
And
that's
I
all I
can't
need to
see
know is,
So, no.
if you do an email, then I'm gonna have you put your email names or addresses on here, from this and the things that we do. And if you don't mind, then what I will do is, and Lois, do you guys use separate emails?
No.
Well, no, I mean, some people, it's a case of you do, so.
It's hard to keep track of them, emails.
Well, but what I do is I set up a group email and I just collectively send it, so I just want to make sure everybody's good. If it's hard for you, then I will work around that, Dave. But I need, if we have email, then I can use that as a tool for communication. And I will also tell you this, my time gets a little bit crazy as Danica can tell you, but if you have something specific that you want me to look at, that you know, we can talk about having you send me an individual piece. It may be that we'll send it to everyone, but if you have something specific that you want me to do a reading on, let me know, because then that would be a tool that we could also use. And I will give you my email. I'll write it down here on the board, but if you wouldn't mind putting your email on there. Phone number would be awesome. I think I have phone numbers here.
Yeah, it'd be good, so especially if we have days that are off. I think most of you are here though. It looks like we have,
Yeah, and I'm gonna give you, this is kind of the general schedule. If we have to make some adjustments, we will, but we're trying to make sure we have enough time to get finished before by the 2nd of May, and then by the end of the month of that month, we're hoping to have whatever we work on in a small journal.
I'm calling Patty and I'll let her talk too while we're sitting here.
We paid, the part of the grant paid for the work that you will do to put it together in a small collective book. Okay.
Okay, Patty, so you're up in Story, right, at the library? Wait, so I hang up on her.
And Patty's last name?
It says Olson, but I think she's one back.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Did I hang up on you?
Well, I don't know what happened.
I'm sorry.
Sorry.
Oh,
So Patty?
yeah, tell us about you.
Tell us, this is Margaret Smith, and I don't know how much you could hear on the phone with regard to kind of the general group and who's here, but my name is Margaret Smith, and I will be the one that does the leading on this group. I'm going to just really quickly say, we're calling them projects, not assignments. I don't believe that this is not high school. This is not college. This is a group to write. And we have 8 weeks of writing. And so the project numbers are just, I've generalized the things that we will work on through this next 8 weeks. And as I said to the rest of the group, if there are some specifics that you want to share about yourself, and then also kind of what you would hope to get out of the group, would you mind sharing that? And hopefully I can readjust or tailor some of the prompts to fit what I'm seeing or hearing from the group.
Sure. Yeah, like I said, I grew up here in Story and I like to write. It's just I want to learn better writing skills. And I do write a page on Facebook. It's called Story Times. Pretty much I'm just rewriting what my mother wrote years ago. And some of my personal experiences too. So it's been fun, but I would like to learn a little bit more. And I thought I would try this class.
Okay. So when you say you want to get to learn a little bit more, is there something specific that you feel like you want to have us work on that we will be looking at in particular?
In particular is probably need a better dictionary, but just more expressive words. I have a hard time. I get entangled up in trying to say what is on my mind in a more expressive way, I guess.
Okay.
That sort of thing. And also, I could just think of 100 stories. I try not to get overboard.
Okay.
Maybe that, just more expressive language.
Okay. Just as I don't know whether you received this, but Danica said she'd sent this out to the people who are participating. I gave everyone a kind of a generalized schedule, and I've targeted certain things to write about. So place, and then the people in your family, and then some object or important heirloom, and an event, historical event that seems relevant and important. The most influential person that could be, you might be the most influential person on someone else, but who might have influenced you may be a focus. Places and people. And I had place and people at the beginning, but it's a really important part of writing. Our place, as all of you have mentioned, is a key part of our identity, actually. And sometimes we run away from those places. We run to someplace, but the place and then those people. And I think of for example, I think of Frank and Lois as being in Alaska, and the significance of the people that you run into in Alaska are really unique. The kind of place impacted who they were, you know.
Yes.
So that kind of thing is, and then the point of pride. I can hear on a number of your stories a place where something is a turning point that you are really proud of. And it doesn't mean you have to brag in an obnoxious way, but it's something that we're happy, we want someone to kind of remember about us. That kind of thing. And then finally, this one I kind of started on your influence. And I wrote it kind of generically, but my prompt actually at the end was to have you be thinking about what would your, and it may not be advice, but what is something that you would pass on to someone else that you have learned about life or about your experiences that can be profoundly meaningful. And I've listened to the people sitting at this table, and I already hear some amazing things. So I just, that will be where we start. And I'm going to hand out something that is kind of a piece that I wrote that just to kind of give you an idea of, and I don't know, Patty, did you receive those 3 things from Danica?
Yes.
Well,
Yes, I have it in front of me here.
okay, well, we're going to work with the one that's called Writing Project number 1, Place. And I wrote one as a kind of a sample.
Okay.
And we're going to read, I'll just kind of have you take a minute. I won't necessarily have to read it aloud, but what I did was I marked it up a little bit so that you can kind of look at some things that I do when or that I want to target in the writing. Can you see that okay, Dave?
Yes.
Okay, and if you can't, I can read it. I just was thinking, sometimes I don't do very well with people talking.
Just read it out loud.
You want me to read it? Okay. So, neighborhoods don't always include city streets and lots of houses. The neighborhood I grew up with was down an old country road, 25 miles from town. It had been a thriving community of homesteaders, but by the time I came along, there were 4 families still living along that road. Caminos, Smiths, Cranes, and Willses. A person had to drive a long way to get to the next neighborhood of Recalusas, Falses, Christensens, and Irigaries. Our headquarters had a framed-in log house, a bunkhouse, an old shanty for a shop, and a framed horse barn that was rebuilt into a modern cinder block building. The main house had originally been square, with a kitchen and living room facing off like parts of a capital L. There were 2 bedrooms and a bathroom, which could not be used as such, and the space where the stairwells went up and down from the main floor to a loft and a basement. The bedrooms fitted into that open space of the L. The stairwell was directly opposite the bathroom, which we could not use because the well didn't produce enough water to flush the toilet. What water we had smelled like it had emitted from hell itself. There was an outhouse across the ditch from the house. A decade after the ranch house was built, 2 porches were added. The front porch faced the mountains, but because the door, I typoed here, because the door wasn't convenient to get to, that entrance was rarely used. The main door was off the back porch. This porch was as large as the eating area of the kitchen, big enough to house a large wooden desk, a closet that wasn't used for coats as far as I ever knew, and a bench with a hinged seat that ran along the bench wall. This bench was a lot like the old sheep wagon benches that was really more for storage than for sitting. Both the back and front doors were 2-inch thick Dutch doors with heavy hardware latches. The main door's latch opened easily, but clanked when you opened it, because the lever latch and its keeper were both iron. It sounded a little like someone tapping a glass with a silver spoon. The front door didn't open all that easily because it didn't get used much, and as a kid, I had to have an adult push the latch open. I don't ever remember the split doors being used as split doors, probably because we had so many Miller moths in the old logs that it was a real effort to keep them out of the main part of the house. Out on the back porch, we had one of the earliest bug zappers that was made. It was probably not the safest device in the world because the cage was directly attached to the electric connection where the light bulb attached. The cage was truly hot wired and was very effective at killing bugs, particularly the moths. To this day, I can still smell the burnt fuzz of Miller moths' wings as they smoldered on the electrified cage. A couple million cups of coffee drunk, quite literally. I calculated it, by the way. Stories of 9 and 10-year-olds acting as summer sheep herders on the mountains, of riding lead on wild horse gathers, of roping an elk on a gelding small enough to be thought a colt, of bronc rides, cattle herds, and good times despite the floods and droughts. Yarns that wove dreams and memories for all who listened. A place where men could get back on their feet. A place where youngsters learned to be cowboys and young men. A place where everyone was welcome to a meal, a pie, and a hot cup of coffee. This was the Smith Brothers headquarters on Crazy Woman Creek, 25 miles from town, 60 years ago, and a million light years from today. So, Katie would know this place because she and her first husband worked there.
Yeah.
And I didn't, but the reason I blocked those in color, and they were a little, I probably should have used, my computer is a little bit overpowering. The
Colors
colors,
printed way different than, it was like a highlighter green.
yeah,
So, you never know.
it got really dark. But I tried to pick out the fact that, for example, I named the names. And that's one of the important parts of writing memoir, is it is important, unless you have a reason not to use someone's name, go ahead and say them, because when we wrote that book, when Fred Gray and I worked on it, one of the things that sold the book was people found their names in the book. They found their family names in the book. They found the places that they grew up in the book. And so it was one of those things that really meant something. And that's one of the reasons when you were talking about your letters to your friends in Alaska or Missouri or wherever, it's they kind of want to know about their place in your life. So it's important. Then there were lots of details that I tried to include. And I specifically wanted you to know it was a log house. And I would probably break it out into more detail about that log house if I were going to do more about place. The bunkhouse, the shanty. I wanted you to know that you use specific words. And what Patty was talking about is trying to get more precise. Sometimes we have to use a thesaurus, but then there's also the benefit of just having other people make suggestions. That will be part of this discussion of, you said house, but what kind of house was it? What did it, like, was it a, 3-story Victorian, or was it a split level, or was it a, my grandmother lived in a 3-part homesteader shack house. They quite literally brought 3 of them in, stuck them together, and as I wrote a poem about it, they were stuck together with wallpaper. So that kind of specific, if you can write that. Identify the objects that you can see in a space. And if you're writing fiction, and you probably already know this, but it's that, is it important? Is it important to the image of the space to give us a feel for what is going to make it happen? Like, let me ask you this, Sam, with your story that you are working on, is it about what you know with regard to being a deep sea diver?
No, it's more about what I know about riding motorcycles.
Okay, awesome. So with regard to the motorcycles, are you specific about the kind of motorcycles and the specifics about how they, sound? Is there sound?
I don't know if I'm saying.
All right, there is a place that you could be thinking about because there is nothing like a motorcycle sound. Okay, it has its own distinct. I mean, there's a reason it's called a chopper, right? So the sound is imperative to getting us. Like if you were a cook, it's it's not just good smells. It's not just delicious. What are the smells? You can't exactly tell someone what a banana smells like, but if you had a banana, you know what it smells like. And so that kind of, we had a big argument several months, it was a year or so ago. Somebody had grown up in the South and we decided that I thought lilacs were the most important spring smell, and it was some other plant, there was some other tree that grew in North Carolina that was the tree. And I went, I don't know what that smells like, so I need a point of anchor. What's that?
Reference.
I need a reference that kind of helps me know what it, honeysuckle. If you've smelled honeysuckle, you know what it smells like. Caragana bushes, there you have a sort of honeysuckle-esque smell. But if you've never had an experience with it, it doesn't mean anything. So you have to provide somebody something to hang on to. So hopefully that gives you a kind of idea of what and I am no Hemingway. I am not, a Steinbeck. I'm not pretending to be the greatest writer, but I wanted to give you a sample of how you might think about a space or, and kind of tying that place to your life. And I know, for example, in our old house, in that loft, that front porch, it had a sloping roof, and the window out the loft was my escape route from doing dishes. I would sneak down out that window and go back out around and then go to the barn. So that could be a jumping off point for a story that you would tell. Does that kind of make sense? So
you want us to write our story about it?
Well, what I want to do is this, and I'm going to give you this as a possibility. And I didn't make copies of this because I'm not sure that this is really necessary. There are ways, and I'm going to give you a sticky note, and I'll show you this if you work on it. And I might be just being too elementary. I don't want to insult you all for, if you already know how to do some of this. I don't want to imply that you can't already do it. I just know that sometimes it's useful to try it out and see. So I'm just going to give you something. Oh, I didn't mean to overlook you. So just for fun, we're going to do this. Like I said, if you can do a grocery list, you can probably do the very first one. So this is your grocery list for the first part of this assignment. So the first part of this assignment is to make a list. And the first piece of the list is what city or county, maybe you didn't grow up in Buffalo or you didn't grow up in some town, so you were out in a county. What's the county that you were in? And what's the state? And then go from there, what streets or roads do you remember what were their names? And you have the most vivid memory. What's the most vivid memory you have in terms of its season? And what did you do there? I'm sorry. What I'm doing is I'm kind of following that list right there. So you, if you look at this, Under here, it's the city or and county and state. And then the streets or road names. And then what was your what season do you associate with that place most strongly? Like the winter time and you remember the snow, or was it in the summer when you remember the cottonwood trees and the wind? Some specific memory about that place in terms of its season. And then I wrote down vacations, but more like what activity do you associate with that particular place? Like, if I think of my home, this description, I think of the horses at the barn. That would be the activity that I would associate with. For some people, it's, you know, I don't know that I do. I think I can. And I'm going to ask them if they'd be interested in that, if they rather than waste the paper. Yeah. I'm going to give you like another minute. Okay, I'm going to stop you for a second. Did this spur things that you hadn't thought about for a while? And maybe it was a prompt of just general memories that you hadn't really considered for a really long time. The prompt that or the handout I just gave you, I don't know how far you got down the list. And on the second, there was actually a third part, and I'm not sure whether we'll do this one or not. I did do this for myself once. I didn't have to make copies because I didn't want to waste the paper. This is anything you want to try. But the second part of this has to do with specific memories of the place. Something that makes that place particularly unique. The things that you can smell, things that you can hear, things that you can remember feeling. Like, we had this old table, which if you were here on the day I taught, I was describing this, that great big kitchen table we had at the ranch. And it had been made out of pine. It was, I don't know who built it. We have the top of it still, but the big frame of it we lost because we took it down. We ripped part of the X pieces. But the thing had been so urethane that it to this day still in pretty decent shape, even though it's made in the shop. But the top of it was just brassy. And it was that light pine. And I don't know how many pieces they used to glue together to make this thing, but it was about this wide. And we figure it's about, just the top of it is about 250 pounds. It's really heavy. The exterior of it is all the old-fashioned 2x4s, like through tubes, and it goes all the way around the outside of it, holding it together. And then there were these giant X's, like supports underneath it. Well, but in my memory, that is a key part of that kitchen on one end. And then the other end of the kitchen was that linoleum that was it was kind of a dusty red linoleum. The way they had done it, it was all these chrome pieces on they had redone the kitchen. So there was this red linoleum that went around the kitchen countertop and down and then all that. But the floor, and you may remember this, there was this great linoleum that held up forever. It looked like cobblestone. It was kind of a brown cobblestone looking stuff. And it was iron. There were actually two colors, and one of them was kind of a lighter color, but and then the deep brown, well, that deep brown, you could cover any, it was like, you could see no dirt. My mother would go out there with her scraping knives in the spring and clean up all the wax that my dad would pour that on the floor to keep it nice and shiny. But anyway, my memories of those specific things, that brown cobblestone linoleum, that great big long 8-foot long table that weighs 250 pounds. You see, what I'm giving you are specifics that help you hopefully imagine, at least on some level, what that looked like. And so as you are writing, the more precise language you can use to describe it. Sometimes you can get a little bit too carried away, but at least if you start with more, then you can cut. But he has exactly, like one of the stories that was in Fred Gray's brother's book that I will never forget. He was playing on, he was only about 5 or 6 years old. Claude Gray was quite young, and he was playing in the kitchen with a broom. I think it was his mother's broom. It's like a straw horse. And he was running around the kitchen, and he ran his face into the side of his table that was so splintery that he ran a splinter inside the cheek of his left cheek. And so he was carrying on. His mother reached around and grabbed the splinter out and sent it back outside to play. I will never forget that image of that splinter going through the side of his face. That was so exact. So it's that, your experiences are all, whatever they may be, are going to be one of those that you help us see. The more exact you can be with exacting that you can do, the words that you choose, the things that you're there. If you are in Spokane in summer, was it hot? As I recall, when I was in Clarkston with my dad, it was literally, there's a place that felt like hell. You go down this canyon, and it was so hot that you could hardly breathe. And I remember going down there and I thought, I don't know what there is to see here, but I'm ready to get out. I don't care what it looks like. It was just so hot. And on the other side of the river, in Lewiston, they had a paper mill, and boy, that was smelly. But smelly isn't going to tell you anything. It was acrid, it was heavy, there was just this kind of burnt smell. So stuff that you can make precise will help the reader imagine. And when you start thinking about your family, what do you want them, what's something that you want to have shared with them about your childhood growing up place?
Just the the housing, the neighborhood, you know, what did we live in? And
Could we, you lived in, what town did you live?
Sacramento.
Sacramento. And was it so it was in town?
We were way outside of town, but it was Sacramento County, but Sacramento was a big town.
And so were you on like a farm?
No, we weren't on the farm, it was just a plot of, like a lot, housing lot.
Okay.
It was being developed into a housing area. And it was mostly old pasture.
Okay.
At one point, it was being changed over into housing lots. So it was way out from town, but it's very rural.
Did they, Jane, did they grow anything in particular in that area?
Yes.
What did they grow?
There were many orchards, of all kinds. Peaches, pears, cherries. There was many field crops, tomatoes, onions, everything could be grown there because it was a river bottom.
Okay. Okay, exactly. Now, do you see what I'm saying? The river bottom, the type of trees, all those kinds of things were they close to your house? Those
The
orchards?
farms were not.
They were not. Okay, so this was being developed. Did they already have streets being built
No.
on it?
They did not have a street when we
Okay.
moved there. We just moved into great big pasture land, and this was supposedly our lot.
Okay.
There were no streets.
Okay.
We watched them develop streets when we were kids.
There you go. Okay, so all of those little details, that would be something, because I bet you there's not a square inch of Sacramento that isn't developed at this point.
Oh, yes, right. But at this point in time, it was,
And so you're giving them a history lesson of what it looked like
way back,
back in the 50s and, was it 50s?
40s and
40s and
50s.
50s. Okay, so that kind of thing, like when I grew up in Buffalo, my mom didn't drive, so we moved to town so we could go to school. The house we lived in sort of had a street. They were all gravel. And where our house was my dad his mother had owned that property, and she gave the property to my parents. Well, there was a man that lived in a great big house behind us that had a dairy originally. And Mr. Gilkey owned all of the whole block except for the far corner in ours. And so he and his brother had developed those two great big houses there, where what we refer to as the Washoe House and the Gilkey House. I don't even know who lives on the corner now. But there were, the streets developed, but we were almost out of town right now. So that kind of history is what you give to people. So yeah, so it's more precise language, most descriptive thing, the pasture, was it all weeds? Was there grass? Was there a ditch? That kind of stuff. Can you give them that kind of thing?
Give it kind of a written picture.
Yes, exactly. And I will just mention to you too, what I did on here, I underlined a couple of examples. They're called similes. Similes are they're a comparison. So on the first page of that story I wrote, I said in 1, 2, 3, the third paragraph, I said the main house had originally been square, with a kitchen and living room facing off like parts of a capital L. So like parts of a capital L is a simile. And it's comparing so that somebody who can imagine an L can imagine what these two rooms look like. Down toward the very bottom, I underlined another one. This bench was a lot like the old sheep wagon benches. Now, if you've never seen a sheep wagon, this doesn't mean anything. If you've seen a sheep wagon, you know that the benches on either side were actually storage spaces, and you lifted the hatch and you put stuff in those by the wheel wells. So they may or may not be comparisons that everybody's going to get, but if you were describing your motorcycle, that specific one, it might be the sound, but it also might be the shape, giving us an image of what this thing looks like, And then over on the next page, I said that when you opened the door, it sounded like someone tapping a glass with a silver spoon. And it was actually louder than that, but that's as close as I could come up with the kind of the
Clinking.
clinking sound. Clink, 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 and it was so loud. I mean, you couldn't sneak in. Kids, we might, well, fortunately, my dad was really deaf, so it probably didn't matter as much, but my mother wasn't. And so if you came in late, they were going to know. Because there's no, I mean, you didn't break in there because there was nothing to break into. The door didn't have a lock on it at all. But you didn't, everybody knew you were there. So anyway, that kind of thing is, the more exact you can give it. So what I would like you to think about, and I'm going to suggest that you take what if you wrote it on this to start with just for fun, come with a little short piece that you can share with the group next week. I'm going to get together with Danica to find out a little bit more about how we handle this with publishing it. But if you've already written something, I would rather have you take what you've already written and maybe do a little work with it. Like if you were describing where you grew up out in the country, then I would like you to not necessarily just start over, but take what you've done. Like you've already written something about in your novel that maybe you could work with. Bring something you have already done. That would be my preference as opposed to just starting from scratch. If you've not written anything, that's when you bring something maybe original and we start building off of that. As I said, I want to sort of tailor my prompts, my project assignments, if you will, to fit kind of what you're telling me. So that it's not just, I mean, I've gone to workshops where, I went with the understanding that I was going to go to an hour-and-a-half workshop, I was going to learn something that time, and then I was going to go away. But since we've got 8 weeks, I want to make sure that this time is meaningful and useful to you as overall. And like Patty was saying, she wants to improve her writing skills. She's already writing, but I want to try to work what we can so that everybody gets a little bit of something that will help them move forward. So any thoughts or questions or concerns so far?
I've never written anything, but could I write it on place? I mean, that's a
Absolutely,
starting
yes,
point for me.
yes, that's exactly what I want you to do, is to just start right here with that project number 1, write about the place that you have that you started with. That would be awesome. Especially, Jan, because you grew up in a place that has changed so much that it would be beneficial to hear about that place. I always tout one of the writers in the writing group on Mondays. Mary Lett came here from Texas after her husband died, and she came with her children who bought the mansion house. Well, she started kind of sneaking in. She didn't feel very confident. And she wrote a full history of a school in Texas that she was integrally involved in, called the Truman State School. It was dissolved by Ann Richards back in the 70s. But she worked in that school for 35 years. It was, for the developmentally handicapped. And she started out as a secretary. And she worked her way up until they ended up having to do project coordination. Anyway, she has a history of this thing. She said, well, I don't want to know. I just don't know if I want to share this because it might not all be accurate. I said, it's your story. And she said, well, some of it isn't very nice about some people. I said, well, some of it is that those people weren't very nice. So it's really okay. But more than that, her family will have a history of, and when she dies, they can do with it as they choose. But I said, this really ought to be at your state archives, because there is no record of this school other than in the memory of the people who worked there. It's gone, has been gone for quite a while. So to me, it was an incredibly important project, but it was a wonderful set of stories, and about the people that were there, she refers to them as the boys, and they lived there. Most of them they were in most state schools. They lived there till they died, or were placed in some place where they could work and become independent. But there were some really remarkable stories about the things that happened in that place. It was just great stuff. So I think I was glad to see that you guys are here because you've got a great story to tell. Edie has an amazing story to tell. I'm looking forward to California. I'm looking forward to all of what you have to share. So every person that's in this group, I'm really excited about what I'm going to hear from you. And I will probably not do this to you most of the time. You don't need me to be writing for you, but I wanted to give you a taste of how you can stir it up. And hopefully that little sticky note will get you going. And if you don't need sticky notes, you can use your journals or but this is an avenue to expand. And this, I don't know that you need it. I did it by the color, but you can start with finding your space and working outward, or you start with a big space and you work inward. Like you might have a house and you work out of the house. You might start with your whole region, like where I lived, and I just kind of scooped it all up and then I bring it back to my house. So you can do it a variety of different ways. It's spatially a way to think about where you are. And then we're going to talk about the people that, were possibly in that place. So
I was thinking, just because you're talking about people maybe not being so nice when you're telling the story, but honestly, I think the more honest you are, the better your writing will be. If you're trying to hold back or say it nicely, sometimes I think being brutally honest when you're making art is where it also kind of comes from, is whether it's comfortable or not.
yeah,
But really, when you feel that emotion in the words, as opposed to if you're holding back, it's not going to really draw people in as much either. Does that make sense?
I'll share this story. My sister has been writing for her church. And for a long time, the pieces that she wrote were really interesting, but they were very interesting. Like they were looking at the people that she was with and the events. They were very out there. And her hands were kind of up like this. Recently, she wrote a couple of pieces that were more personal. One of them was trying to get from the ranch to Buffalo in a snowstorm. And the other one was an experience when she was on the Lake Longano in Ethiopia, watching this incredible morning change the lake from this placid, just incredible. It was absolutely one of the most beautiful pieces of writing I've read in a long time. And I said, Joan, it's because you let your emotions be there. Suddenly we got to see, the anxiety of driving from one, not even being able to see from one post to the next, but just finding the rumble strip under her wheel. And that sense of, disorientation and just this incredible, but the emotion that was in it. And then that other piece, and I thought that's a key of letting your emotions be present. And I suspect it's a totally different experience writing now, having gotten kind of that emotional stuff going. So yeah, so that's cool. Yes, Edie.
That's one of the things that I've done in my writing, is I've said how I felt or how that affected me. And I think that's why I pull back from wanting people to read it.
Yeah, and my sister is like that. I mean, there's something she won't share. But I think a lot of it is, some of it you can say it in such a fashion that you don't have to just be, pouring the acid on the street. You don't have to, it doesn't have to become acidic, but it is an acknowledgement of these emotions. And when I got into a writing piece that I had a person that I did not want to malign, and in part because I know all of their family, I changed the name.
Yeah.
And I acknowledged that I had changed the name. Anybody that reads it will probably know who I'm talking about. But I didn't want to just, and then what has happened as I've written about that person, I came to realize I won't use the word I'll describe myself, but I was not a nice person. Realizing that my projecting my emotions on this person, as I've written, I've come to a new understanding of what I did not understand about that person in our conflict. So sometimes it's you come to an understanding that you just didn't know you had until I've done this on several different projects where I've gone, oh, oh,
Working through it.
yeah, I mean, and so that, putting it on paper, sometimes you go, well, no, I'm not gonna share that. But on the other hand, sometimes you do, but you just change it, and you acknowledge, I'm changing this a little bit, so that somebody else does not get hurt by what I'm sharing. And then there are some things that you can't stop, you have to put it on paper, because this is part of the story. You know, we have family history that's not very comfortable. I think all of us do.
Mhm.
And so it's acknowledging that difficulty and saying that there are some things that, you know, I don't have to go into all the sordid details, but I sometimes have to be just acknowledging this happened. So yeah. So I mean, we'll work on that, and I get that. Some things, you know, people say you need to be really honest. I'm going, I don't need to be that honest.
Kindly.
I can do it in a way that is not cruel or demeaning or whatever. Okay, we are now 5 minutes past, so I don't want to keep anybody. Thank you very much. If you have questions, oh. I don't know if I brought-
Time flies.
Well, and
Especially in classes too. It's, yeah.
I will do this. It's a little
She could be
small,
a comedian.
but this, rather than you have, this is my phone, these are my phone numbers, and my email. And so if you get something that says crazy woman, it is not spam.
Sorry about the cord.
I don't know if you want that or not, Dave. Do you have a reader?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So you can see
Yes.
that it's
Sorry. Next week we'll set it up.
Yes, and I will,
Out of the way.
do you want some of these to send to them, or do you want to just make a picture?
Here, I'll take a picture and send it to them.
Okay, so if there are questions or concerns or whatever, please be sure to let me know. But we will be, and just as an FYI, I substitute teach. And one of the reasons we did it at this hour is that Fridays they are done at 1:30. I will make an attempt to try to be here before 2, but it depends on whether I have to deal with a discipline issue or something after school, and I can't come right away. But I don't anticipate that. What's that?
When you say
Flashback.
deal with the discipline issue at school, I go,
Not you.
I'm retired.
Well, you know what? I actually love to do it most of the time. Today, I ended the last hour with 2 girls that I thought, boy, life has certainly changed. It's 2:00 every Friday till, and these are the dates that we are meeting.
May
Okay.
2nd.
All right. And this is for Gladys, if we have a way to
Oh, yeah.
give that to her. And I don't know if we need any other hard copies or not.
Yeah, we'll take a couple. Warren, I'll try to get
Okay, I'll tell you
him
what, I'll
tracked
just
back
leave
down.
all
I
of
know my
these.
dad was out of town today. That's Jim. Gladys, she'll be here.
Yeah,
I don't know Clarence Bishop, do you?
Actually, I do.
Okay.
His family
Thanks,
had a
everybody.
homestead out on our property. And
Oh,
Jerry Bishop lives over at the Agape. And Earl is the guy that works with